Hi guys, it's Martin. I've been a dating and relationship coach for 17 years, and today we're going to talk about a topic that for me is just weird how much of a thing it is. It's about red flags. I'm actually pretty confused about this concept. It just seems like red flags is code for shit I don't like. That's actually what it seems like. It's like, he wants to watch the game with his boys every Wednesday. Oh, it's a red flag. It's like, no, it's just a thing that he likes. It's not a red flag. So, I have a real tough time with this concept, and to me, everyone has problems. Like, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. Everyone's got problems. I mean, one of the things that I say is that if you meet someone and up until the age of around 35, I would say, it's really I think that up until the age of about 35, the problems are not their fault. And what I mean by that is that I think it takes until about 35 to have enough time to recognize your problems and fix them. Now, most people that are really focused on their dating life are under the age of 35. So they haven't finished working through whatever their issues are. So when you encounter these women or when you encounter these men who are under 35, yeah, they got problems. You get problems growing up, and then step one, you have to recognize them. And then step two, you got to figure out that it's a problem. And then step three is you have to figure out how to fix it. And none of this stuff is that straightforward. And so, when I meet someone who's in their, 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, and they got problems, it's like, yeah, that fucking sucks. And it's only when they get to be, more towards 35, if you still see those problems existing, then you start to wonder, okay, now this is kind of your fault. You should have done a little bit more to be fixing this. So you need to get on top of these things. So there's this, I feel like red flags is just it's like a way of obfuscating what's really going on. When you just say something's a red flag, then everyone can go, oh yeah, it's a red flag, avoid that. Instead of actually dealing with it and encountering it and figuring it out. It's just like an easy way to write people off. It allows people to be lazy in their dating. That's really what it is. The fact is that everybody has red flags. And it's more a matter of, okay, guys, they think a girl's body count is a red flag. Oh, she's been with 10 guys. There's a red flag. And it's like, well, maybe or maybe not. It depends. Like, what was the circumstances? Why? And also, guys' understanding of women's body counts is really off. If you think about, I kind of use kind of as a way to think about a decent number of what is it I expect or what I think is relatively normal for a girl's body count, which is something, by the way, I don't really think about much. But if you really want to think about what a reasonable body count is, I tend to think an average of like 4 guys a year is a pretty good number, right? So 4 guys a year doesn't mean every year there's 4 guys, because maybe, she's in a relationship that she really enjoys for, a year or 2, and then, there's just the one guy. But I think an average of 4 a year, because what happens is a girl goes out into the world, she starts dating, she bangs a couple guys, then she gets into a relationship, and then that relationship ends, she bangs a few more guys, that relationship ends. But if you think about maybe she sees a guy for a few months, then, she stops seeing him, that relationship ends, then she's dating around, and then she gets together with one guy, right? That's a pretty typical pattern. And so anyway, I think about 4 a year is as an average. Now, if the girl starts, let's say she starts at the age of 18, all right? A lot of girls in the West start younger than 18, but let's just say 18 is a nice, easy number. So if she starts at 18, by the time she's 25, that's 7 years. 7 times 4, that's 28 dudes. Now, when you look at that number, you go, oh my God, she's been with 28 guys, there's so many, But if you think about it, it's like 4 a year. It's not really that many. I mean, how many girls would you like to smash in a year? Definitely a lot more than 4. You'd like to get more than 4 new girls in a year, for sure. And you're a guy, and you would do that if you could, and it requires a lot of effort. Whereas girls, all they have to do to sleep with 4 guys a year is not say no to the 100+ guys that ask them. It's not even the same category of situation. So so that's kind of how I tend to do it. Is I tend to look at for a year about as being a reasonable number for a girl. So now if a girl is 25 and she's been with, let's say, 100 guys, because there are girls who are like that. That to me is not a red flag in the sense of like, oh, there's no way I could have a relationship with this girl. That's not what it would mean to me. What it means to me is, okay, the fact that we had sex is unlikely to lead to an ongoing relationship with this person. Now, you could call that a red flag, I suppose, but I wouldn't call that red flag. I just call it she has a certain pattern, and her pattern is to sleep with guys and that not lead to a long-term ongoing relationship. So if you want to have a long-term ongoing relationship with that girl, it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's unlikely that you're going to be the one guy out of the 100 dudes she's banged in the past 5 years that she's going to want to stick around with. Now, you could say, oh, she must be doing that because she's damaged and this and the other. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe, but that doesn't really matter. It only matters if you can end up in a relationship with her in the first place. So, maybe you feel good to go, oh, well, she has this red flag because she has this high body count, so I'm not going to see her anymore. But that bitch probably wasn't going to see you anymore, actually, and you're just using it as a defense mechanism or as a way to be lazy, to say, oh, well, I don't want to chase after some girl who's been with that many guys. And it's like, well, I mean, depends who the girl is. That's what I would say. Depends who the girl is. You have, and it's funny because guys pretend that they have all this pride around it, but you can see that guys are so thirsty for, porn stars, for OnlyFans girls who make a living fucking dudes on camera. And they are falling in love with them and telling them that these girls are princesses and all this stuff. I don't have a strong opinion about, whether those girls are princesses or not. I'll leave that up to you to decide. But the fact is that the body count in and of itself doesn't matter. What matters is how that manifests in her behavior and in the way she lives in the world and interacts with you. That's the concern, not the number itself. And so I think all of the time when people are talking about red flags, they're using these generic things that are negative instead of realizing that, everyone has lots of negative things about them. And it's more about, do those negative things make it difficult for you to have a relationship that you can be happy with that person? That is the ultimate question. And some arbitrary list of red flags won't cut it. So let's use the example like, some people would say, oh, you shouldn't be with a woman who's got a lot of debt, okay, or who's bad with money. It's like, okay, well, if you're a middle-class guy and you need to be careful with the budget because you don't have many prospects for improving or increasing your spend, then yeah, that you can avoid that. But the thing is that maybe that woman's desired lifestyle is not infinite. Maybe it's like she needs to spend, let's say, $4,000 a month to be to feel that she's living at the level she wants. And if all her life, her spending, her earning income has only allowed her to spend $3,500 a month, then you're looking at a $500 a month deficit, right? So every month she's falling $500 behind. So that's, $6,000 behind every year, okay? But maybe her desire, if that's the case, then an extra $500 is all she needs so that she doesn't go out of debt. So that she doesn't go into debt. Then that means that, if she's in a relationship with you and you're living at that level, then maybe her debt problems go away. I think for myself, when I was young and broke, I had a hard time not being in debt because my necessary expenditures were higher than what I was making a lot of the time. And once I got to a certain level of income, I never had debt problems again. So you have to really think about that as an example. We tend to go, oh, if that person has debt, that says something negative about them. Well, maybe the negative is that they just don't make enough money yet. So, I think red flags are just people being lazy. That's what it seems like to me. And it's giving them an easy out for pretending that they're rejecting another person when really what they're doing is giving themselves a way to not put in the effort and not have to face the fact that maybe that person wouldn't even like them either. So
that's a really good point.
So that's what I think is going on. And I know guys, I've been in groups, or I've known groups where that was kind of the dating philosophy, was kind of to say, oh, well, look, all these people are bad. That's why you're single, because your standards are so high. And it's like, okay, well, you can live that way, but then you're just going to be alone.
And you see a lot of women in their 30s or late 30s having this mindset around what you just said.
Yeah.
They have these super high standards.
Yeah.
But they're just unrealistic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as a guy, if you want to be successful with women, you have to, your pride has to go out the window pretty early, because, you just get rejected all the time. You get on Tinder, you get rejected. You approach girls on the street, you get rejected. You approach them at the club, you get rejected. You're saying, hey, how about if I take you out for a nice dinner? And the girl's like, no, I don't want to even go to dinner with you, that you're going to pay for. you know how many times I've turned down a dinner that someone was going to pay for and they were going to pay for me? 0. I have never turned down a dinner if someone offered to pay for me. Never. Okay? But women that I want to be with, they've done it all the time. They do it all the time. They're like, I don't want to have dinner with you. I don't want to have drinks with you. I don't even want to run into you on the street. But and so this thing about standards is it's basically a cop-out, because it's really saying, like, I'm not going to work with the real world. The real world is not designed around you. So you can't have things exactly as you want. You have to make compromises and trade-offs. Now, if your trade-off is, well, I'm just going to be alone, that's fine. You can decide to be alone, and I don't have a problem with someone who says, I don't want to have a relationship. But I think that anyone who says that is really just lying to themselves. I mean, who wants to just grow old by themselves? People don't even want to grow old, and then to do it all alone. It's horrible. It's just so, people maybe pretend that that's what they want, but I don't believe it's true at all. So what was that? There was something else you said.
The childhood trauma stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Healed your past.
Yeah.
Bringing it into the next relationship.
Yeah,
because that could be a red flag if they've had a history of, for example, like you said earlier, being violent. They've had a history of harming their boyfriends. That's a red flag.
Right. Yeah. So there are some things that so if you're talking about physical violence, there are people who have anger issues. There are people who have anger issues. Do you avoid someone who has anger issues just because they have anger issues? Not necessarily. I know a girl who she has broken things, not when she was with me, but I know that she has broken things when she's frustrated. Obviously, is that good? No. Do you think she wants to be like that? No. Is she the kind of person that can work through that and do something about it? Probably. Okay, now you could just write her off and say, forget about her, but in this case, with this particular girl, I probably wouldn't. I think there's so many positive qualities. She has so many positive qualities that are really hard to find as a package anywhere else, that this one thing, is a big negative. And I wouldn't say that when you get into a relationship with someone like that, I wouldn't say that I know it's going to work out. It's more like, okay, this is a problem. I recognize it's a problem. Let's see if this person is willing to work towards improving and fixing that. Because as I was saying before, usually people can't fix their problems by the time they're 27. Like, it just doesn't happen. I mean, you don't have time to fix your problems before you're 27 because you're too busy just getting life started. Living on your own, getting your career going and all these things, that your problems are not usually get in the way of those kind of societal things. And so those get kind of ignored. And as I was pointing out, you need to recognize them too. A lot of times, when you're from a certain environment, these things that are problems it's not apparent that they're problems until you encounter a different group of people. Then when you encounter a different group or a different category or a different environment, then you start to realize, oh, you know what, the behaviors that I had that were very useful for me there are not very useful for me here. And this new environment is much better environment for me, and it takes time to adapt to that. So, I think it's just about writing people off too soon. And I know, and women, oh God, this drives me nuts. You see women, they say things like, I don't have time to waste. And it's like, well, you better, because that's how relationships are. Like in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a really great book. Every time I read it, I find more and more things in there that are useful. It doesn't resonate with me that closely, actually, as a book, because the type of person he is very different from the type of person I am. He's very driven towards success and work and getting things done, and he's not that oriented around people. That's why the second half is so good, actually, is because that's very clearly where he is bad. And, one of the things he says in there, he says, you think effectiveness with things and, efficiency with things, effectiveness with people. Right? And what that means is that with people, you need to find approaches that are effective, and they may take, you don't know how long they're going to take. They're not efficient, but you're looking for something effective. And so this whole idea that you can date and not waste time is, I see that, girls say that, and I just think, I don't even want to date a girl who says that, because how can you get to know someone without wasting time? Like, it's not possible, because if you're looking for a relationship, a long-term relationship, how do you know? Most people who end up married, if you ask them, oh, when did you know that you were going to be with this person? Or they don't go, oh, as soon as I met them. Like, yeah, they might say that at the wedding or some bullshit. But if you sit down with them for real and you talk to them, they don't usually say that. They go, yeah, I had no idea. We met through this thing and I kind of liked them. We started to hang out. We just got closer and closer. That's normally how it works. They wouldn't have gone, if they'd said, oh, I'm only looking for, I don't want to waste my time, then they probably wouldn't have spent any time with that person in the first place to let that relationship develop. So, that if you want to talk about a red flag, it's a woman who says she doesn't want to waste time. I don't want to waste my time. I'm looking for, whatever. We were just talking about this, there are girls out there, women have this idea that guys don't want to commit. And it's like, well, they don't want to commit to most of the girls that are available to them. That's the reality. There are plenty of girls they would love to commit to. Those girls just don't give a shit about those guys, so the guy doesn't have the opportunity. And that's generally how it works. The guys that you're encountering, that you're dating, are about at your level. And because they're about at your level, you're not an obvious pick for them. And that goes the other way too. When I'm dating a girl, I'm not an obvious pick for her most of the time. If I'm going for the quality level of girl that I should be, then I'm not going to be an obvious pick for her. Because she's going to have lots of options, and each of those options has different pros and cons. And because they each have different pros and cons, it's going to take a while to sift through the different options and decide, out of these, this one is the best one for me. And so I don't expect that girls that I meet that I'm going to be into are going to be into me immediately. And most of the girls that are most interested in me, I'm probably not going to be into them immediately, because if they're interested in me, that tells me that, they are, I'm not I'm someone who is above their typical level of what they get, right? That's probably what it means. And so, you know, and yeah, I could say, well, you know, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my time. But I mean, maybe those girls are really good. I mean, I'm not going to find out if I don't waste my time. So, you know, it's just ridiculous. And, you know, and I think this other thing about red flags, I think it's kind of like a game, you know, like people are sitting there and they're like, ooh, I'm going to see if I can spot the red flags. You know, there's that, there's a really good TED Talk that talks about this, but he's saying about how people really like to sit there and catch someone doing something wrong. They really get a lot of people really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And I think that I think is, you know, what you were talking about with some of these women who have standards that are too high. It's natural that women are looking to eliminate guys. It's natural because they have a lot of guys coming at them. But I think that you can get to another level where the girl starts to expect, oh, you know, guys are this and they're bad and they do this. And so then she's just on the date and she's just watching. Oh, look at, he did that. Yeah, I knew it. That, you know, those guys are always like this or always like that or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's just a cop out. It's just a cop out.
What about I mean, you kind of touched on it, like if someone hasn't, for example, in a lot of different circles, they're like, oh, he hasn't done the work, quote unquote, done the work on himself to become a man and not have boyish tendencies, or, you know, like he's not mature enough, for example, right? So that's a red flag. If he's not mature, then he's not, or if he's not responsible, or if he does stupid shit all the time, stuff like that. That some women would say that's a red flag.
Yeah, you know.
Or if he has a bad relationship with his parents, that's a red flag.
Oh, that's funny you bring that up because yeah, I was just talking about that with a girl who was saying that she has a bad relationship with her family, and so she was like, I pray to God I don't meet any guys who they think that's a problem. Like her mom was like abusive and like beat her up. And it's like, you know, her last boyfriend was like, why don't you have a good relationship with your mom? You need to fix that. And it's like, do you really want to spend time I mean, you could probably, but is it worth it? Probably not. Now, some people, maybe they would say, oh, it's always worth it because it's your mom. But I don't know, life is short, you know? That's what I would say. People that are really, you know, have been repeatedly very negative for you, yeah, you can go back and let them, you know, beat you up some more, but why don't you just go and find different people? But what you were saying about this, you know, they have some model in their mind about what a guy should be like. And they expect that guys are going to magically know that. I've encountered this before. Like, you know, you see this sometimes. Girls will write things on their Instagram or something, and like, they'll say things like, well, you're grown, so you should know that. And it's like, what? No, that's not how it works. You don't know shit if people don't tell you. And what you're doing right now is not fucking telling me. So it's like, well, if no one ever told me, how am I supposed to know?
Well, that's the thing, though. There's the assumption in that statement is you're grown, therefore you should have heard this many times, so you should already know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. I mean, how can you decide what other people should know? I mean, you just like, I mean, if you raised that, you know, my mom used to say this sometimes when my dad was acting in ways that, you know, we thought were just kind of, what is he doing? My mom would say, I didn't raise the man, I just married him. You know, the thing is that, you know, unless you raise a person, you don't decide what they know and don't know. And, you know, once again, you can go, well, I don't have time for that. It's like, you know, there are plenty of people who, if you just told them, they would be very responsive to that. I remember when I first moved to Japan, and, you know, I would wave someone goodbye, and I would wave, and I would just turn around and leave. Because, you know, that's nothing really particularly strange about that. But they don't do that in Japan. In Japan, they like sit there and they wave, and then the person walks further away, and they wave some more, the person walks further away, they wave some more. They keep doing that until they really can't see the person anymore. Now, I didn't know that. Now, that's a Japan thing. It's not a Western thing. So, I didn't know that. So I didn't, does that make me a red flag? No, it just makes me a person who doesn't know things. And then after I knew, someone told me, they said, oh, it feels very cold when you do that. And I said, oh, really? Okay, I didn't know. Okay, so I just stopped. I just changed it. So problem solved. You can just, and let me tell you, if you want to know, here's the opposite of a red flag. You have a person and you point something out to them and they go, oh, I didn't realize, thank you. And they change it. That's fucking amazing. Give people the opportunity to do that. Instead of writing them off, give them the opportunity. I actually, sometimes when I give advice to women, they tell me, oh, I say, why didn't you, they were seeing some guy. Okay, why aren't you seeing him now? Oh, well, he did this thing. Oh, well, did you tell him that you didn't like that? Well, no. Well, why not? Well, I don't, that's, maybe that's the way he is. I mean, really the reason is because they're concerned about conflict, or they're concerned that he's not going to like it, or whatever. I mean, women don't like being told, women don't like that, so they just assume guys don't like that. I mean, guys like to do things right. I mean, really, it's like, if a girl's like, I want to take you out to dinner, and the girl's like, no, I don't want to go out to dinner with you. If every guy would love to know, why won't you go out to dinner with me? And the girl, she said, I don't want to go out to dinner with you because I don't think you're going to take me to a nice place. The guy goes, okay, well, how about this place? And the girl goes, oh, that's a nice place, I'll go. Guy will be happy. He won't go, fucking bitch. He's going to be happy that he got to take you out. I mean, guys are so much more straightforward. I mean, this is one of the things that's nice about working with guys versus working with women. When you work with a guy, you tell him, look, man, you need to lose weight. You need to change your body language. You need to change how you dress. The way you stand, it's unattractive. And the guy will either change it or he won't. And if he won't change it, he just goes, yeah, I don't want to do it. And he just lives with his situation. He doesn't sit around bitching and moaning. He just goes, it's too much work. Or he just fucking changes it.
To your example, people like to cut people off. Well, it's not that they like it, but maybe they do because they don't want to let people in. Kind of like what you were saying earlier about if I let someone in, they're going to find out shit about me that I don't want them to find out. So let's cut them off quick.
Right,
so if
right.
they do something I don't like, then it's an easy excuse to just like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Instead of accepting, all right, what did I do wrong? I'm going to do better next time. So I think that's a part of it too.
Yeah.
I saw this one Instagram reel. This guy, it went quite viral, and he was like, if somebody does something I don't like, I ain't got time for that. I'm just going to cut them out. And it's like, that's a lot of people are like that because again, they don't want to deal with conflict. They don't know
potential conflict. It might not even be conflict.
Exactly. It's the idea of potential conflict.
Right.
They don't want to deal with the expressing how they feel about what that person did, or maybe they don't know how to do that.
Right.
Without feeling angry or something.
Right.
They just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that women don't seem to understand is that men will jump through hoops of fire for them. And I know women are thinking, well, the guys I really want wouldn't jump through hoops of fire. Yes, the guys you really want, but the girls that I really want don't even know I exist. So, I mean, at least, you could camp outside of the dude's, condo or something, and maybe if he's horny enough, he'll call you in give you some action. But if as a dude you camp outside some chick's place, quite the opposite. You don't hear about male groupies because it doesn't work as a guy. So but yeah, I totally agree. So I think that's a big difference. With women, it's really tough to give them advice because they don't really actually want advice most of the time. They just want to feel good about themselves. And it kind of makes sense. There's this thing about how women are more prone to negative emotion than men on average. And so it makes sense, they get the same message, and for them, it affects them, more in terms of the amount of negative emotion they experience from the same level of criticism will be higher on average than it is for a guy. But I think the other thing is that inherently, what it means to be a man is so much more subjective than what it is to be a woman, right? I mean, that's why so many insults about men are about them being boys or them being like women or not having testicles. It's all of these things that sort of these sorts of things, meaning that you are less, and most of it is based on behavior, right? It's based on societal ideas about what you're supposed to be like. But women don't have those as much because it's more biological. It's like, you can theoretically, you can give birth to a child, so you're a woman pretty much. And so, I think that they don't come from the very beginning as needing to achieve certain things to be accepted as an adult, let's say, or as a male or as a female. I don't know. To be accepted as meeting the standards for their gender. There you go. That's a really big difference. Guys understand that to be accepted as meeting the standards of their gender, it's all based on hitting certain targets and milestones, whereas for that you have to actively work towards, whereas for women it's like automatic, a lot of it. And this is also why women can move into men's fields. They can wear men's clothing and they could still be women, but men can't wear women's clothing and be men. It's like automatically it's done because it's an act for men much more so. And I don't mean an act as in it's fake. I mean it's much more of a social construct for men than it is for women. And I know there's all this discussion about femininity as a social construct. Yes, of course it is. But the crux of it is the ability of women to give birth. Whereas the crux of it for men is, are you worthy of being given the opportunity to impregnate a woman, right? And it's like society decides what makes a man worthy of that. Whereas for a woman, it's like, people maybe don't like you very much, but you could still do that, theoretically. So, there's not as much, active hoop jumping on the part of females.
Right. Cool.
To get there.
That's your red flags video.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. There's probably some other stuff, but I mean.
What do you think is a red flag?
What do I think of as a red flag?
Yeah.
I guess, I don't think of it, I think of it more as like, there are some problems I just don't want to deal with or I don't feel equipped to deal with. Okay, so for me, you want to know a red flag for me personally? A red flag for me is a picky eater.
Okay.
Not because somebody else couldn't date a picky eater, I just don't want to deal with it, And to me, there's two parts to it. It's like, are you a picky eater? And the second part is, are you willing to keep trying things that you think you don't like? Because if it's a person who, a girl come over, she said, I had like a cream cheese bagel, and she came over and she said, "Oh, what is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's cream cheese." She's like, "Cheese? Oh, I don't like cheese." And I was like, "When was the last time you had cheese?" The girl was probably like 23, 24. I was like, "When was the last time you had cheese?" And she's like, "Oh, like when I was a kid, I had like cheese pizza once." And it's like, your criteria for not liking cream cheese is that you had cheese pizza when you were 10? Like, that makes no sense at all. And I was like, just try it. And, just try it. Okay, I'll try. Oh, this is good. Yeah, it's fucking good. That's why I'm eating it, What do you think? I'm eating nasty shit? Like what? So I think, for me, once again, a picky eater is a red flag, but the real red flag isn't, are they a picky eater? It's really about, are they willing to try it anyway? If they're willing to try it anyway, then I can probably deal with it.
A woman not being open-minded for you is a red flag.
I really don't like this term open-minded. Sometimes when I work with guys, they say, I want an open-minded woman. I say, oh, open-minded, she'd enjoy it if me and the boys ran a train on her. No, not like that. No, I don't want her like that. Like, well, I mean, you're the one who said open-minded. I don't know what it means to you, I mean, that's pretty open-minded. He's like, oh, I think, if you're gonna, when you think about what you're looking for, you need to be more specific than just saying open-minded. Because one person's idea of open-minded and another person is very different.
In this context, it'd be open to eating different types of food.
I think they should be open to thinking about trying anything.
Well, that's going back to your example. It's the same thing.
I think she should be willing to think about trying it. Okay, that's because, you know, here's the thing is that if you're dating someone for a long time, there's going to be plenty of things that you want to do that they don't want to do. And, you know, you want someone who's going to go along with it at least sometimes and will go along with it in relatively good cheer. I mean, I think that's usually the case. Obviously, there are some people who lead really boring lives and maybe they never encounter anything like that. But I mean, the way that I live life, you know, I'm bound to encounter things that I don't really want to do, and a person I'm with is going to as well. So, so to me, that's the key thing is being willing to consider anything. It's like, you know, I've never used any drugs. It's not because I have this stance of like they're evil and they will destroy your life. It's not that. It's just I sort of feel like, what if I try cocaine and I like it too much? That'll really fuck me. And I just think, you know what, it's better not to. But you know, other people, they experiment with these sorts of things, and you know, they go, yeah. You know, I have one friend. He goes, oh, it's the best. It's the best. It's also the worst. So you know, yeah. So I think you should be open-minded to the idea. Open-minded to the idea of trying anything. Whether you would actually try it, at least be willing to consider it, weigh the pros and cons before deciding. That to me is key.
Then, people should have standards.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hesitate to call them standards. I wouldn't call them standards. It's things that I like and that work better with me. It's not the same as standards.
What's the difference?
Standards comes with some kind of objective judgment. That's the difference, right? So when you say, oh, I have standards, it sort of implies that like anyone who doesn't share your standards is stupid or you know, or they're not as discerning as you or something. And that's not what it's about. It's about finding people who are very complementary. And when I say complementary, I mean like, you know, when you're in school, you learn that if, you know, you have, 60 degrees and 120 degrees are complementary angles because together they make 180. That's what I'm talking about when I say complementary. It's like we fit well together, we match each other. So that's what I'm looking for. And what matches me is not going to be the same as what matches you. You know, so for example, some people would say, oh, well, I know you think it's important to be like an early riser, right? I don't think so at all. I mean, I'm not an early riser. I'm often most productive at night. So for me, that's not an objective. Like when someone, you know, people often feel bad that they sleep in and are not morning people because society kind of has that standard. But I don't personally have that standard because my lifestyle actually doesn't work like that. And so it's not a stand, you know, that could be a standard for many people. But for me, it's just a preference. And I think that's another way of looking at it or thinking about it is that a lot of people, they think what are standards are really just preferences. And because they think of them as standards, they think that somehow that makes them better than other people or smarter than other people. I think it makes them feel that they're smarter. Like they look at their friends and go, oh, I would never date a guy like that. And it's like, you know, they're suggesting that they wouldn't date a guy like that because they're too good to date a guy like that. And then this chick is single. And it's like, it's not about whether he's good or some objective level of good. It's whether he's good for you in the way you want to live your life and the lifestyle that you want to have and the experience in life that you want to have. So, you know, it was funny. I was talking to my sister and I was saying, oh, you know, if I had a daughter, maybe guys worry that if their daughter's really attractive that, you know, all these guys are going to be after her. But what would worry me more is if I have to tell her that she needs to lower her standards. Be like, look, you need to make yourself a little easier. You're gonna, I don't want to have that conversation. You know, that is not, you know, that is not the conversation I'd like to have. And I was telling my sister said, you shouldn't tell her to lower her standards. You should never tell her to lower her standards. And I was like, what? What do you mean? She's like, if her standards are too high, she needs to lower them. And she's like, oh, you shouldn't tell her that. And I was like, well, like, you know, if she says, well, I'm not going to date any guys under 6 feet tall, And she's like, my sister was like, oh, that's not a standard. I was like, yeah, it is a standard. That's exactly what it is. And she's like, no, that's just being smarter about your choices or something. And it's like, okay. But I mean, it's like, yeah, that's a standard. And, things like that are just they're just, arbitrary and silly.
So you're against having standards and preferences?
No, I'm pro preferences.
You're pro preferences, but against standards?
Yes, that's right. I'm pro preferences, but I'm against standards. Yeah.
All right.
Because, once again, as with the open-minded thing, any trait has a range, right? It has a range. So whenever you meet someone and, someone says, oh yeah, I have a bad temper. Well, what's the range on that meaning of bad temper? Like, they say I have a bad temper. I don't know what it means. If you say I have a bad temper, I don't know what that actually means in terms of your behavior, right? I know that you said that, and I have my own idea of what a bad temper is, but maybe your idea of a bad temper and mine is not the same. So you think you have a bad temper, and I'm like, oh, he's pretty mild, right? Could be. So I think that, you need to explore the traits more rather than just taking them as some universal thing that you understand.
Right, so then when someone says, for example, I have a bad temper, right? That someone else, the girl could receiving that could be like, no, the guy could be like, oh, that's a red flag, or the girl, whatever. Yeah.
It could be a girl. I mean, I know a girl who has a bad temper.
Right. But
who's really great.
But you're saying we have to question that.
Yeah, I mean, if they said I have a bad temper, so because very commonly, especially if I'm with a girl that I'm really like excited about, I'll say, you seem so great. Like I'm like really into you, but I mean, I know you can't be perfect. Okay, I mean, it'd be great if you were, but I know you can't be. So tell me something that's not good about you. And and so let's say she said, well, I have a bad temper. And I'll say, okay, like, what do you mean when you have a bad temper? And I'll get her to explain, and I'll get her to tell me some examples of where this bad temper has come out. And maybe I'll go, oh, yeah, no big deal. Or maybe I'll go, oh yeah, that's a real problem. And then it's like, okay, well, then maybe I would say, oh, okay, well, do you think that that's, negative for you in some way that you have this bad temper? And probably they're going to go, yeah, I think it caused me some problems. And I'll say, oh, have you been doing anything to try and improve that? And maybe they say, yeah, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. Or maybe they say, no, I think it's fine. Or, it's very unlikely they're going to say, no, I think it's fine. But, it can happen. That to me is really what we're trying to figure out here, because I'm trying to figure out when I meet someone is, do I want to deal with their problems, right? Because people are problems. People are annoying and they're problematic. They just are. And the more time you spend with them, the more annoying they are, and the more problems they cause. And it's not because there's something wrong with them, it's just because they're people and they have needs and desires and limitations. And, it's like people get sick and someone needs to take care of them. Well, yeah, it's fucking annoying. And if they weren't there, you wouldn't have to take care of them. But then again, if they weren't there, they couldn't take care of you either. So, so it's just like, that's how it is. People are a bundle of problems, but with those problems, presumably they come with a lot of positive things too. And it's about finding that balance that works for you, because, what for one person is a big problem is not a big problem to another person, and what could be a small benefit to me might be a huge benefit to someone else. So for example, let's say a fat booty or big tits. Some guys will do a lot for a girl just because she got a fat booty or some big ass titties. But if she was flat chested, they'd be like, nah, I'm not putting up with that shit, right? That's, some guys are like that. For me, they gotta have some booty. Gotta have some booty. But bitch flat chested, no problem. No problem. Just as long as, you lick those nipples, she goes, we're good. We're good. No problem. We're good. So for me, if she has a nice rack, that's not going to move the needle that much in terms of me wanting to go more out of my way. But for another guy, it might. And, and the same goes for a girl can cook. For some guys, that's like, oh shit, a girl can cook. Oh, and they're gonna jump out a window for her. For me, I think it's a nice to have, but from my perspective, it's like, if she can't cook now, that's okay. We can go to cooking class together, and that can be a fun activity, and then she can cook. So it just depends on what you're willing to deal with, and what you're willing to work through, and what you're not.
That's good. So that's your stance on red flags. and standards and preferences.
Yeah, I mean, I think the preferences thing is really valuable to think about, and I think that guys should spend a lot of time on that. And I want to say that girls should too, but I hesitate because I feel like because girls are already so prone to eliminating guys. I guess what I would say is that typically, when women feel that they've met the wrong guys, their approach is to raise their standards. And I would say that is the incorrect approach. The real approach that they should be using is to examine what they're using as standards and look at what those are and think about which of those they can adjust or change. And so now they're filtering in for a different group of guys. And it's not like I met a girl and she's like, oh, I dated a guy he was very different from what I normally dated. He was an introvert. And it's like, well, I'm not saying that instead of dating extroverts, you should date introverts. I mean, that's like too broad. I think you need to get more granular. You need to look at things at a higher resolution. And I think that's another one of the big problems is that people are just looking at too low of a resolution. And when I mean low resolution is like, when you get up close, it's super blurry, right? High resolution, you look close and it's still really clear, right? That's what I mean. You need that higher resolution when you look at people and you think about people that you might date or might be with. Because at a low resolution, there are many people you'd go, oh, I'd never be with that person. But at a high resolution, if you really knew about them, I mean, I think about that with me, like if there was a full-length feature film about my life and, I could round up all the hot bitches I want to bang in a room and they all watched that movie, I think there'd be plenty of them who would go, oh, hey, I'm all for this. But that's not how it works, right? They get a very low resolution representation of me because we don't have that much time and they make a judgment based on that. And so I think a lot of times you need to be a lot more proactive. I mentioned that question that I ask women when I'm really into them and I'm thinking, oh my God, wow. I've thought of questions that are really powerful in terms of helping me to get in and figure out more about this person, and that's what I would say is if you're a person, a woman especially, but who is thinking that they need to raise their standards, probably you need to dig a little bit deeper the first few interactions you have with the guy, and if you have some idea of like what your preferences are, then it just gives you a better direction of where to dig, So that's why, for example, the picky eater thing, for me, is a great question because it allows me to sort of an entryway into finding out about them more and in a way that's useful for me. But maybe that isn't, as useful for somebody else. Maybe for somebody else, they might ask questions like, why do you do the job that you do? Right? Maybe that's a better entry question for them. As a woman, for example, that might be a good entry question because maybe you're trying to figure out, is this a guy who is ambitious for money? Is he ambitious for status? Is he ambitious in the sense that he is responding, his job is about a certain calling that he has in life? And about some kind of mission that he's hoping to accomplish, and this is kind of a step in that direction. That kind of a question might be very useful for a woman to ask. It might be very useful for a guy to ask too, but most of the guys I know generally don't really care about the career. Although, I typically ask women early on, do you love your job? Before I ask them what the job is. And that's because if they say, nah, then I just say, okay, well, let's not talk about that. We'll talk about something else. But if a girl says, yeah, I love my job, then it's like, okay, cool. Let me hear about it, because if they don't love their job, then there's not very much value in talking about it because it's probably just something she's doing to make some money. And it doesn't really say that much about who she is as a person. But that's just one example. But if you're a guy and you think that a woman's career is important, then, maybe even if she doesn't love her job, you would ask about it. So it depends, once again, on your preferences, right? So that's what I would say is that, higher resolution thinking about exploring another person higher resolution and thinking about what your preferences are. I have a friend, and he's married, and he and his wife really like cold weather places, as one example. And for me, like, they talk about their vacations, and I'm just like, oh God, this sounds horrible. And they talk about where they want to live, and they want to get some ski chalet, and I'm like, oh God, I would never, or like, if I'm looking at Instagram or something, and I see a girl who's got a bunch of snowboarding pictures, I'm just like, okay, probably shouldn't date this girl. Because, just not my thing, right? Now, it doesn't mean that she's not a lovely person, and doesn't mean that I couldn't have a great relationship with her, but, it's like, I've got to choose a certain number of girls to pursue at any given time. So it's like, okay, well, let's go with the one who has all the beach pictures and not the one who has the snowboarding pictures, right? As another example. I think, here's another example of when I talk about preferences. So, typically what I say is I'm looking for a woman who is not close to her family, but has a good relationship with them. To me, that's kind of ideal, because I don't want to deal with a bunch of family stuff, that doesn't really interest me, to like have to always like go to her parents' place for various activities. And I mean, once again, this isn't about standards. This is just about, I don't want to spend my time doing that. And if the girl's really close to her family, then we're probably going to have to spend a lot of time doing that. So, but ideally she has a good relationship with her parents, right? But I mean, if she doesn't, depending on the reasons, that's okay too. If her mom was an alcoholic and used to beat her, or her dad was an alcoholic and used to beat her, I wouldn't expect her to have a good relationship with them, right? But that's my ideal, is, she has a good relationship with them, but she's not close to them. But somebody else, they would want someone who has a really close relationship with their parents, and they really enjoy the idea of, all this doing family activities and, those sorts of things. Once again, which is better? Neither. It just depends on you. And you can't say like, oh, they don't talk to their family every week, red flag. There's nothing wrong with that person just because they don't fit some preference that you have. They're just different. So yeah, maybe that's everything I have to say. We talked a lot more than I expected. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, put them down below. Like and subscribe, and in the comment section, please do not be a dick. I don't like dicks. I don't like them.